This story is titled, My Sister Claimed I Was a Danger to My Own Kids, so I Made Sure She Lost Custody. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, big news! I've launched a new Reddit channel. This time, the background isn't Minecraft. It's Subway Surfers and a Christmas theme to match the season. Check it out, subscribe, and join the fun. Links in the description. See you there. Now let's start the video. Alright, so here's the thing. I'm Lucas, 36, a single dad of 2 amazing kids. Ethan's 9 and a ball of energy, always sketching something or asking a million questions about dinosaurs. Mia's 6, super smart for her age, and has this thing where she loves puzzles and can spend hours putting them together. We live a simple life. Nothing fancy, but we're happy. Or at least we were, until my sister Natalie decided to stick her nose where it didn't belong. Natalie, 39, is married to Adam, and they've got 2 kids, Liam, 11, and Emma, 8. If you were to meet Natalie, you'd think she has it all together. She's got the corporate job, the Pinterest-perfect house, and she's always dressed like she's going to some magazine photo shoot. Adam stays home with the kids, which I've got no issue with, but the dynamic there? It's off. He always looks like he's one step away from a meltdown. Growing up, Natalie and I never got along. She was the golden child. Straight A's, teacher's pet, always following the rules. Me? Not so much. I was the kid who'd get grounded for sneaking out or skipping homework. I've worked hard to get my life on track as an adult, especially after becoming a dad, but Natalie still acts like I'm that rebellious teenager. She loves to helpfully criticize everything I do, especially when it comes to raising my kids. A few weeks ago, we had a family gathering at our parents' house. These things are rare because nobody really gets along, but everyone pretends for the sake of keeping the peace. Ethan and Mia were running around the backyard with their cousins, laughing and just being kids. It was nice, until Natalie opened her mouth. She made this big comment in front of everyone about how kids who aren't disciplined enough grow up to cause problems later, while looking directly at my son, who had just tripped and spilled his soda. My dad gave me a look like, don't take the bait, so I laughed it off and moved on. But inside, I was fuming. Natalie has this way of making everything feel like a personal attack, even when she's pretending to just make a general observation. Fast forward a few days, and there's a knock at my door. I open it, and there are 2 people standing there from CPS. My heart dropped. The woman said they'd gotten a report about unsafe living conditions and needed to do a welfare check. I'm standing there trying to process what's happening while my kids are in the living room, totally unaware. I let them in, of course. I mean, I had nothing to hide, but it felt awful. They went through everything, asked about our routines, looked at the kids' bedrooms, even checked the fridge to make sure we had enough food. They talked to Ethan and Mia, and my kids were polite but confused about why these strangers were asking them questions. When they finally left, they told me everything seemed fine, and they'd close the case. But the whole experience left me shaken. I knew right away who was behind it. Natalie. She'd been making those digs at the gathering and probably decided to take it a step further by calling CPS. The thing is, this wasn't just petty anymore. She crossed a line. This could have gone way worse. What if the CPS workers hadn't believed me? What if my kids had said something innocent but got misinterpreted? I decided to confront Natalie at the next family event. I didn't accuse her outright, but I asked if she'd heard anything about someone making a CPS report against me. Her response? She smirked, actually smirked, and said something like, well, people just care about the kids and want what's best for them. That was all I needed to hear. The rest of the family? They were no help. My parents were upset about the CPS visit, but they didn't want to take sides. Family is family, my mom kept saying. Adam just stayed quiet like he always does, and Natalie acted like she hadn't done a single thing wrong. I'll admit, for a few days, I was overwhelmed. It felt like my world had been turned upside down because of her. But then I realized something. She's been doing this my whole life, taking little jabs, making me feel less than, acting like she's better than everyone else. This time, though, she wasn't going to get away with it. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her mess with my family again. She made this personal when she tried to paint me as an unfit father. And if she wanted a fight, well, she picked the wrong person. The more I replayed everything, the more I realized she wasn't just throwing jabs anymore. She was actively trying to ruin my life. Calling CPS wasn't some offhanded comment or casual insult. It was calculated. That realization hit me hard. I started to notice things I hadn't before, like how her so-called perfect life wasn't as polished as she wanted everyone to believe. It wasn't hard to pick up on once I started paying attention. The cracks in her marriage, her kids' behavior, even the way Adam acted at family gatherings. It was all there if you looked closely. Let me start with Adam. When Natalie and Adam first got married, he was this laid-back, easygoing guy. He was the type to crack a joke at the most serious moments just to lighten the mood. But now, he's like a shell of who he used to be. At family events, he barely talks unless Natalie prompts him. And even then, it's like he's afraid to say the wrong thing. He's always tired, always distracted. The guy doesn't even laugh the same anymore. It's this forced, nervous chuckle like he's waiting for Natalie to approve it. The kids, Liam and Emma, are another story. Liam, who's 11, used to be this loud, energetic kid who'd always drag Ethan into whatever wild game he'd thought up. Now he's quiet and constantly checking to see if Natalie's watching him before he does anything. And Emma, who's 8, seems to act more carefully around her mom. Every time Natalie raises her voice, even if it's not directed at her, Emma flinches like she's expecting to get yelled at next. At one family dinner, Emma spilled her water, and Natalie immediately snapped at her. "You're so clumsy! Can't you go one meal without making a mess?" Everyone went silent, including Emma, who just sat there with her head down. Adam tried to defuse the situation by cleaning it up himself, but Natalie shot him a look that shut him down before he even said a word. Watching it unfold made my blood boil. Then there's the social media front. Natalie's Instagram is like this shrine to how amazing her life supposedly is. There are pictures of perfectly plated dinners, family game nights, and vacations where everyone is dressed like they coordinated outfits in advance. But when you're around her in real life, it's a different story. At one point, I noticed Adam looked completely miserable in most of their pictures. His smiles didn't reach his eyes, and in some of them, you could tell he was just going through the motions. It was subtle, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It was like the cracks in their perfect little world were all right there if you looked closely enough. What really got me thinking was a conversation I had with Adam. It was at another family barbecue, and we were stuck at the grill together. Natalie had wandered off to talk to our mom, so it was just the two of us. Adam started asking me about my freelance work, which was surprising because he usually didn't talk much. I explained how I managed my schedule, how I balanced work and time with my kids. He nodded along and then, almost casually, said, "It must be nice to have that kind of freedom." The way he said it wasn't bitter, just wistful. I asked him what he meant, and he kind of hesitated before saying, "Natalie plans everything down to the minute. Sometimes it feels like I'm just there to follow orders." It wasn't a full confession, but it said enough. Adam was clearly struggling, and Natalie's need for control was a big part of it. A few days later, I got a message from someone I hadn't talked to in years. Adam's old friend Rachel. She and Adam used to be really close before he married Natalie, but they drifted apart over the years. Rachel reached out to me because she'd seen some of the family drama play out on social media and was worried about Adam. She told me that Adam had been venting online about his marriage in private forums. According to her, he felt trapped, like he was walking on a tightrope every day. Natalie controlled everything, what the kids ate, what Adam wore, even how he spent his downtime. Rachel didn't have screenshots, but she gave me enough details to confirm what I'd been seeing with my own eyes. I also started noticing things about the kids. Liam was struggling in school, which Adam mentioned offhandedly at a family gathering. He said the school counselor had recommended therapy for Liam's anxiety, but Natalie thought it was unnecessary. "He just needs to focus more," she'd apparently told Adam. It was heartbreaking to hear because Liam is such a bright kid, but he's clearly dealing with way too much for his age. Emma, on the other hand, had become more withdrawn. At one point, I overheard her talking to Ethan about how she didn't like going home because Mom gets mad a lot. It was such a simple statement, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. No kid should feel that way about their own home. The final straw was when I saw Natalie yell at Adam in front of the kids. It was at a small family get-together, and Adam had forgotten to bring a specific type of juice Natalie wanted for the kids. She lit into him like he'd committed some major crime, all while the kids stood there, silent and uncomfortable. Adam just took it, muttering an apology and walking away to get whatever she wanted. At that moment, I realized how deep Natalie's control went. It wasn't just about me or her trying to play the perfect sibling. She was toxic to everyone around her, including her own family. I knew I couldn't sit back and let her keep hurting people, especially her kids. They deserved better than the constant stress and pressure she was putting them under. And Adam? He needed someone in his corner, because he clearly didn't have the strength to stand up to her on his own. After realizing how bad things were with Natalie, I knew I had to do something. The problem was, I didn't really know what that something should be yet. Calling her out directly wouldn't work. She'd just deny everything and make herself out to be the victim, which she's frighteningly good at. But the more I saw and heard, the more I knew I needed to build a case. Not a legal one, at least not yet, but enough proof to show the rest of the family and maybe even help Adam and the kids if things got worse. First, I started taking notes. Not in some elaborate way, but just jotting down stuff I noticed. For example, at the next family dinner, Natalie's oldest, Liam, sat there quietly picking at his food, while Natalie talked over everyone about her kids' incredible discipline. She even joked about how it's all about tough love, which made my stomach turn. At one point, Emma dropped her fork and immediately froze, like she was afraid Natalie would call her out in front of everyone. Natalie didn't even notice, but I did. I wrote it down later that night. Around this time, Adam started opening up more, though cautiously. I didn't push him, just let him talk when he felt comfortable. One day, he mentioned how Natalie had taken away the kids' snacks because she didn't like how much sugar they were eating. Not just junk food, all snacks. Fruits, crackers, everything. He told me Liam had started sneaking food from the pantry at night because he was so hungry. Adam said he'd tried to bring it up, but Natalie accused him of undermining her parenting. That one stuck with me. I mean, taking away snacks? Kids need food. It's not rocket science. But it fit perfectly with Natalie's obsession with control. It wasn't about what was best for the kids. It was about everything being done her way, no matter what. I also started talking to people outside the family, like some of the parents at Liam and Emma's school. I wasn't nosy about it. I just asked general questions, like how their kids were doing and whether they liked the teachers. One parent mentioned that Liam had been having a hard time in class lately. The teacher apparently called Natalie in for a meeting to discuss his anxiety, but Natalie brushed it off as Liam just needing to try harder. The parent didn't know much beyond that, but it was another piece of the puzzle. Meanwhile, Rachel, the old friend of Adam's who'd reached out to me, was a goldmine. She started sharing more about what Adam had vented about in those private forums. One thing she mentioned was how Natalie would yell at him in front of the kids, blaming him for things like forgetting to pick up groceries or not folding the laundry the right way. He'd written something like, "I feel more like one of her employees than her husband." Rachel also sent me a few screenshots she'd found from when Adam talked about the kids. In one, he mentioned that Emma had started wetting the bed again, and Natalie's response was to punish her by taking away her bedtime story. That one made me sick. Bedwetting is a stress thing for kids, and Natalie's solution was to make Emma feel worse? It was becoming painfully clear that her parenting style wasn't tough love. It was emotional abuse. I kept documenting everything. At one point, I overheard Liam telling Ethan that he couldn't play outside for more than 15 minutes because Mom says I have to study. They were at a family event, for crying out loud. What 11-year-old has to study during a family barbecue? At another gathering, Emma accidentally let slip that she'd been skipping lunch at school because Natalie said she needed to lose a little weight. Emma, an 8-year-old. I don't even know how I kept my composure when I heard that. Later, when I mentioned it to Adam, he just sighed and said, "It's not worth arguing with her. She'll just make it worse." That's when I realized how deep this went. Adam wasn't just tired or overwhelmed, he was completely defeated. He didn't feel like he could stand up to Natalie at all, and the kids were paying the price for it. I decided to start looking into resources for him. I found information on local family counselors, men's support groups, and even legal aid services. I didn't know if Adam would ever use them, but I wanted him to have options. Around this time, Natalie's behavior started becoming more obvious to other family members. My cousin Amanda pulled me aside at a family birthday party and asked, "Does Natalie seem off to you lately?" I played dumb, letting her vent without revealing how much I already knew. Amanda mentioned that Natalie had snapped at her for bringing cupcakes to the party, saying they were too sugary and setting a bad example. Amanda's exact words were, "I'm not sure if she's just stressed or if something's seriously wrong with her." The turning point came when I saw Emma's teacher at a grocery store. We ended up chatting and I casually mentioned how much Emma loved school. A white lie, but I needed an opening. The teacher hesitated for a moment before saying, "She's a sweet girl, but she seems nervous sometimes, like she's afraid of getting something wrong." That hit me hard. It wasn't just the family seeing it, it was spilling over into the kids' school lives too. I wrote all of this down. Every comment, every observation, every piece of evidence I could gather. I even started keeping screenshots of Natalie's social media posts, just in case they contradicted what she said later. It wasn't about being petty anymore. This was about protecting Liam and Emma. They didn't deserve to live like this. And Adam didn't deserve to feel trapped in his own home. By the end of it, I had a mountain of information. It wasn't enough to go to CPS. At least, not yet. I still wasn't sure what the next step would be. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her keep hurting the people around her. Things started unraveling faster than I expected. The funny thing is, I didn't even have to do much at this point. Natalie's own actions were doing the heavy lifting. The more she tried to control everyone around her, the more obvious it became that her perfection was nothing more than a flimsy facade. It all started with Adam. For months, he had been dropping hints about how bad things were at home. He never came out and said it outright, but you could tell he was miserable. One evening, after another tense family dinner where Natalie bossed everyone around, Adam stayed back to help me clean up. I don't know if he was stalling or just needed a break from her, but as we wiped down the counters, he let out this long, tired sigh and said, "I don't know how much more I can take." That was the first time he openly admitted things were bad. I didn't push him. Adam's not the kind of guy you can pressure into talking, but I told him he didn't have to deal with everything alone. I mentioned that I'd been looking into resources for him, like support groups and legal advice, and his eyes lit up for the first time in months. It was like he'd been waiting for someone to throw him a lifeline. A week later, Adam showed up at my place unannounced. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I need help," he said, plain and simple. That's when we got to work. I gave him the list of resources I'd put together, and we talked through his options. One of the first things we did was open a separate bank account for him. It wasn't much, just a place where he could start squirreling away money without Natalie noticing. It felt like a small step, but it was huge for Adam. For the first time, he was taking back a little control. Meanwhile, Natalie's behavior was getting worse. At the next family event, she had another one of her infamous meltdowns. This time, it was over something ridiculous. My mom forgot to make a dish Natalie had requested. Natalie blew up in front of everyone, going on about how it's not that hard to follow instructions, and why does no one in this family take anything seriously? My mom looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, and the rest of us just sat there, awkwardly staring at our plates. Even Adam, who usually tries to smooth things over, stayed quiet. You could see the tension on his face, though. He was barely holding it together. The kids, as always, were caught in the middle. Liam looked embarrassed, and Emma was on the verge of tears. After Natalie stormed off to calm down, I pulled Adam aside and asked if he was okay. He just shook his head and said, "The kids are starting to notice more. It's getting harder to shield them from it." That broke my heart. I knew I had to step up my efforts to support him, not just for his sake, but for Liam and Emma too. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, Adam texted me and asked if I could pick up the kids from school. Natalie had some work emergency, and he was stuck dealing with an issue at home. I didn't mind. It gave me a chance to see Liam and Emma in a different setting. When I got to the school, Liam's teacher pulled me aside. She seemed hesitant, but eventually said, "I've been noticing some changes in Liam. He's been more withdrawn lately, and he mentioned feeling nervous about going home. I thought you should know." When I told Adam what the teacher had said, he looked devastated. "I don't know what to do anymore," he admitted. That's when I suggested he meet with a family lawyer. At first, he was hesitant. "It feels so final," he said. But I reminded him that this wasn't just about him, it was about protecting Liam and Emma. That seemed to flip a switch for him, and a few days later, he had his first meeting with the lawyer. While Adam was starting to take steps toward freedom, Natalie was digging herself into a deeper hole. At another family dinner, she went on a tirade about how nobody understands the sacrifices I make for this family. She claimed Adam didn't appreciate her. The kids were ungrateful, and the rest of us were too judgmental. It was like watching someone implode in real time. The more she talked, the more people started to see through her. Even my cousin Amanda, who had always been one of Natalie's biggest defenders, started to pull away. "She's exhausting," Amanda confided in me after the dinner. "I used to think she had it all together, but now, I don't even know who she is anymore." Things came to a head when Adam finally decided to file for divorce. He didn't tell Natalie right away. He wanted to make sure all his ducks were in a row first. With the help of his lawyer, he started gathering evidence of her behavior. Text messages, emails, even a few recordings of her yelling. It wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. Natalie, of course, had no idea what was coming. She was too busy trying to control the narrative. She started telling anyone who would listen that Adam was lazy and ungrateful, and that she was the one holding the family together. But the more she talked, the more people started to see her for what she really was, a bully. When Natalie finally found out about the divorce, she lost it. She called me, screaming about how I'd poisoned Adam against her. "This is all your fault," she yelled. "You've always been jealous of me." I hung up without saying a word. I wasn't going to feed into her drama. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Natalie tried to block Adam's access to their joint accounts, but he was prepared. She badmouthed him to mutual friends, but most of them had already started distancing themselves from her. Even our parents, who had always tiptoed around Natalie's temper, started to take Adam's side. They offered to babysit the kids more often, and even helped Adam find a new place to live. By the end of it, Natalie was backed into a corner. Her perfect image was crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. Watching it all unfold, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Adam and the kids were finally getting out, but sadness that it had to come to this. Still, I knew we were on the right path. The fall had begun, and there was no stopping it now. By the time the court proceedings began, things between Natalie and Adam had hit rock bottom. Natalie wasn't just angry, she was desperate. She launched into full-on damage control mode, but her efforts were laughable. She started telling anyone who would listen that Adam was a terrible father and couldn't handle the pressure of family life. It was the same song she'd been singing for months, but now with an added layer of melodrama. The problem for her? Nobody was buying it anymore. I'd kept my distance from Natalie throughout the whole ordeal, partly because I didn't want to give her any more ammo, and partly because I had my hands full helping Adam prepare. His lawyer, Erin, was a rock star. She wasn't flashy or dramatic, just sharp and focused. Erin had gone through every piece of evidence Adam had collected, texts, emails, even recordings of Natalie's rants, and pieced together a solid case. The goal was simple: full custody for Adam with supervised visitation for Natalie. It wasn't about revenge, it was about protecting the kids. The first day in court was tense. I went with Adam for moral support, though I wasn't called to testify just yet. Natalie walked in with her lawyer, all dolled up in what was clearly an attempt to look like the perfect mom. She had this forced smile plastered on her face, but the second she saw Adam and me sitting together, her expression turned icy. If looks could kill, I'd be 6 feet under. Her lawyer's strategy was exactly what I expected. Paint Adam as incompetent and unreliable. They argued that Natalie was the primary caregiver, the one who maintained structure and discipline, and that Adam simply wasn't equipped to handle the demands of full custody. It was all smoke and mirrors. The judge didn't seem impressed, especially when Erin started poking holes in their claims. One of the most damning moments came when Erin brought up the kid's school record. She had statements from teachers and the school counselor detailing Liam's anxiety and Emma's withdrawal. Natalie's lawyer tried to downplay it, saying every kid goes through phases. But then Erin hit them with a recommendation from the counselor that Liam continue therapy, which Natalie had outright ignored. The judge took notes on that one. The next blow came when Erin played one of the recordings Adam had made. It was Natalie berating him in front of the kids, calling him useless and an embarrassment, while the kids were crying in the background. Natalie's lawyer tried to object, saying it was taken out of context, but Erin calmly pointed out that no context could justify speaking to your spouse like that in front of your children. Natalie's face turned bright red, and for once she didn't have a snappy comeback. The second day of court was my turn to testify. I was nervous, not because I had anything to hide, but because I knew Natalie's lawyer would try to twist my words. When I got up there, I stuck to the facts. I talked about what I'd observed at family gatherings, Natalie snapping at the kids for minor things, Liam and Emma looking scared to make a mistake, and Adam being shut down anytime he tried to step in. The judge leaned forward slightly, and Natalie's lawyer didn't even try to discredit me on it. They moved on quickly, probably realizing they couldn't spin it in Natalie's favor. What surprised me most was how many people stepped up to support Adam. Amanda, my cousin, who had always been one of Natalie's allies, testified about a time she saw Natalie scream at Adam in front of everyone. She admitted she'd overlooked Natalie's behavior for years, but couldn't ignore it anymore. Natalie's attempts to defend herself were a train wreck. She brought in a couple of her friends as character witnesses, but it backfired spectacularly. One of them tried to praise Natalie's parenting, but ended up contradicting herself when asked about the kids' behavior, admitting that they seemed tense and quiet at social gatherings. The courtroom drama hit its peak when Natalie took the stand. Her lawyer must have coached her to act calm and composed, but Natalie's temper got the better of her. When Erin started questioning her about why she pulled Liam out of therapy, Natalie snapped. She went on this long-winded rant about how therapy is for kids who can't handle life and how she was teaching Liam to be strong. It was like watching a train derail in slow motion. The judge didn't say anything, but their expression said it all. This woman was her own worst enemy. The final nail in the coffin came when the kids' court-appointed guardian gave their report. Both Liam and Emma had been interviewed, and their statements were heartbreaking. The waiting game after court was tough, but Adam was prepared. He'd done everything right, and the truth was finally out there for everyone to see. All we could do now was wait for the judge's decision, but deep down, we all knew the outcome. Natalie had lost, and not because of anything Adam or I did, but because of her own action. When the judge's ruling finally came in, it felt like a weight had been lifted off everyone's shoulders, except Natalie's, of course. Adam was granted full custody of Liam and Emma, and Natalie's visitation rights were limited to supervised visits until she completed a court-ordered parenting class and anger management. It was everything we had hoped for, and more. Natalie naturally was furious. The ruling hit her like a ton of bricks, and she couldn't hide her anger. She stormed out of the courtroom the moment the judge finished speaking, muttering under her breath about how the system was biased against strong women. Adam and I just exchanged a look, relieved that it was over. Well, mostly over. Natalie being Natalie, there was no way she'd go quietly. For Adam, the first few weeks post-ruling were all about adjusting to his new normal. He moved into a cozy, three-bedroom house in a nearby neighborhood. It wasn't as big or fancy as the one he'd shared with Natalie, but it was warm and welcoming. Most importantly, it felt like a fresh start for him and the kids. The first time I visited, Liam and Emma were already decorating their rooms with posters and string lights. The difference in their demeanor was immediate. Liam seemed more relaxed, and Emma was actually smiling. A real smile, not the stiff, forced one she'd worn for years. Meanwhile, Natalie was unraveling. She tried to spin the custody ruling as a misunderstanding, but nobody was buying it. Her social media posts were a bizarre mix of pity parties and fake positivity. One day, she'd post a long rant about how the system always favors the wrong people, and the next, she'd upload a picture from her supervised visit with the kids, captioned with something like, "Being a mom is my greatest joy." The comments were brutal, people calling her out for her hypocrisy, or straight up ignoring her attempts to fish for sympathy. Her meltdown didn't stop online. She tried to stir up drama within the family, accusing anyone who supported Adam of betraying her. My parents, who had been hesitant to take sides at first, were finally done with her nonsense. They started spending more time with Adam and the kids, offering to babysit or drop off meals. Even my cousin Amanda, who used to defend Natalie, cut ties completely. "I can't deal with her toxic energy anymore," Amanda told me. "She's exhausting." Natalie's isolation only grew as her financial situation worsened. Between court fees, child support payments, and the cost of her court-ordered classes, she had to sell off a lot of her prized possessions. The flashy SUV she used to brag about? Gone. The endless shopping sprees? A thing of the past. She even moved into a smaller apartment, which she tried to pass off as downsizing by choice. But everyone knew the truth. Of course, Natalie wasn't about to let go of her grudge. She made one last attempt to regain control by dredging up old personal information about me. Stuff from years ago that had no relevance to anything. She tried spreading it around the family, probably hoping it would make me look bad. But it backfired spectacularly. Instead of turning people against me, it just made her look petty and desperate. Even people who had been on the fence about her were finally done. "She's completely lost it," one relative texted me after hearing about her antics. Eventually, CPS closed the case on Adam's household, declaring it a safe and stable environment. It was the final stamp of approval that he'd done everything right. Natalie, however, remained on CPS's radar, with periodic check-ins tied to her supervised visitation. It was a small but satisfying reminder that her actions hadn't been forgotten. Toward the end of all this, Natalie approached me at a family event. She looked defeated. Natalie's reign of control is over. Adam and the kids are thriving. And the rest of us? We're finally able to move forward, without her shadow hanging over us, almost like a shadow of the person she used to be. She tried to apologize, saying she'd made mistakes and wanted to make amends. I listened, but when she was done, I told her the truth. Her actions had caused too much damage to forgive. "You didn't just hurt Adam and the kids," I said. "You put my family through hell too. I hope you can change, but I don't want you in my life."